Allison, can you explain what internet is?
It spans the globe like a superhighway. It is called internet.
I want everything about my house off the internet!
Christian is a high-functioning autistic child. This past fall, on his own initiative, he entered a contest based on a favorite cartoon character.
Exactly what Sonic the Hedgehog? A cartoon, and I listened to what Sonic says at the end of it.
Christian is one of only about 100 winners nationally to receive $1,000 worth of Sega games and equipment.
Pokemon is a marketing phenomenon. If you hadn't known it before, know it now. Pokemon is big.
Oh boy, and I have speed energy on it. Slam attack. I am straight. And no slanderous troll is gonna alter me in such way. I have a subscription to Playboy.
Chris Chan is probably one of, if not the most documented human being in the history of history. People know more about Chris Chan than they do about Christopher Columbus. They know more about him than they know about Galileo, Isaac Newton, George Washington, probably all put together.
Now, why do I say this is the most documented person on the internet? Ladies and gentlemen, this person, Christine Chandler, Sonichu, Chris Chan, is more documented than Jesus Christ or anybody else that you have ever heard of.
I'll send in detectives, I'll send in police, I'll send in everything in my power!
Just because you don't know doesn't mean that people don't know. Chris Chan has been internet celebrity for 20 years.
Chris is the creator and author of Sonic Chew and Rose Chew series. Apart from referring to themselves as Chris or Christine, the creator also goes by Christopher and Ricardo.
And look at my eyes, my face. I can't be more serious than how I am right now. Those damn slanderous trolls.
Chris Chan, have you not? There's Ken Burns documentaries about it.
We are looking at a creator known as Gino Samuel, who's making a 59-part and counting documentary on Christine Chandler. Each of these episodes ranges from 30 to 40 minutes long.
Christian Weston Chandler. I've been wanting to make a video on him for quite a while. He has so much presence online.
It's the most documented human ever. Never heard of him, right? No. And then this is such an old-ass reference. Like, if somebody is younger, they're like, yeah, I know about Chris Chan. When I first
Do you know about Chris Chan, Jamie?
And it really has gone from a comedy to a tragedy as one of the internet's earliest and most famous lolcows.
A YouTube personality called Chris Chan has just been arrested in Virginia on, of all things,
It is a name whispered across forums, etched into memes, and dissected in videos longer than college courses. Chris Chan is said to be the most extensively documented person in internet history. The question, who is Chris Chan, plunges you into a labyrinth of webcomics, trolls, criminal confessions, bizarre feuds, and tragic spirals. It is a story spanning decades, from a shy autistic child creating colorful worlds, to a lightning rod of infamy whose life became a living, breathing saga written by Chris and by thousands of strangers across the internet. Chris Chan is not just a person, he is a legend, a cautionary tale, and an endless, uncomfortable reflection of the internet's power to create, destroy, and obsess. Throughout this chaotic odyssey, certain moments have crystallized into internet legend. Snapshots that capture the strange gravity Chris has over the digital world. There was Sonichu, Chris's homemade comic that fused Sonic the Hedgehog and Pikachu into one electric, heartfelt creation, a symbol of childlike imagination untouched by irony. There were love quests, public and painfully earnest campaigns to find a sweetheart, each documented with too much seriousness. There were the troll wars, battles fought across emails, phone calls, and fake personas, each one a chess match Chris never realized he was playing until it was too late. And then there were the rants, confessions and declarations of love and fury, broadcast directly to an audience that grew less sympathetic and more entertained as time went on. Each of these moments wasn't just an internet oddity, they were milestones in the evolving relationship between creator, audience, and spectacle. Chris became a mirror, reflecting not just just his own triumphs and mistakes, but the internet's emerging thirst for drama, tragedy, and unfiltered human vulnerability. Chris Chan became an archetype. There are lifetimes of content doing deep dives on this person. This is not another deep dive. This is an examination on what Chris Chan represents. This person should not be famous. There is absolutely zero rational reason Chris Chan should be this well known. So why are people so fascinated with him? The internet of the 2000s was a wild frontier, a place rampant with curiosity. In this era, cruelty was a sport. In this strange, untamed digital landscape, Chris Chan became an unwilling star. The rise to infamy was not born by talent or scandal, but of the world's fascination with unfiltered authenticity. The raw, awkward humanity that most people hide. Chris was not ready for the spotlight. The internet itself was still young, still learning how to connect with one another. And in that learning process, Chris Chan became something new. The first widely known and most iconic lolcow. A lolcow is a term born from the twisted marriage of ridicule and entertainment. A lolcow is a person whose behavior invites mockery so predictably and endlessly that they become a spectacle. They're like a jester unaware of the court they're performing for. The emergence of the lolcow forced uncomfortable questions. Was this bullying? Was this cruelty disguised as just watching? Where was the line between documentation and harassment? Seriously, was this bullying? This phenomena extends beyond the internet. I remember my first time asking this question during childhood. At recess, kids would usually play basketball or jump rope or whatever. Some of the kids, just doing their own thing, would ride the swings for a little bit. There was this one kid, let's call him Swingy Stan, who would always be on those swings for the entire duration of recess. Every single day. One time I was on the swings and Swingy Stan got to recess late, sprinting over only to see that every swing was occupied. He asked every one of us for our swings, and when nobody would give up their swing, he went nuts. This guy started screaming, throwing a tantrum, and crying loud. Usually when kids would cry, they would cover their face so you couldn't see they were crying, but not this dude. He was bawling loud, putting on a show for everyone. Whatever year of grade school this was, we knew we were too old to be acting like that. All of us on the swings just kinda looked at each other and started laughing because we were so confused why he was acting so outrageous over something so unserious. As the school days went on, the same thing kept happening. Kids would get to the swings before Swingy Stan, and Swingy Stan would start bawling and throwing a tantrum. He would be filled with rage, saying, "You will give me your swing now." And the kids would go, "Dude, you're acting insane." Word got around, and the swings became super popular at recess. Crowds of kids would gather just to watch as Swingy Stan would scream and throw a tantrum and yell threats at people. Of course all the kids would laugh because it was so unbelievable how pressed this dude would get over nothing. Now some kids took a moral high ground on this. They would say, "Hey, all of you involved in this crowd, you guys are bullying." Now this was something very interesting for us to think about because this did not align with what we were taught about bullying. Nobody was beating up Swingy Stan. Nobody was calling him names. We were just watching. Swingy Stan would make a lot of noise. Obviously, this would get a lot of attention. This would make us wonder, does he expect not to get attention from making all this noise? Or does he want this kind of attention? To us kids, the swings became a front row seat to a performance. Swingy Stan did not look like a victim. He looked like a performer. In our immature perspective of the world, we would wonder, if this is bullying, is this guy asking to be bullied? We were too young to use the internet at the time, but as I grew older, I recognized a lot of the archetype of Swingy Stan in the archetype of Chris Chan. The internet took a large interest in this phenomena of seemingly strange performances.
You face me! You face me right now, you son of a bitch! Come on, you son of a bitch! I'm challenging you! You come face me right now!
The line between bullying and public reaction has gotten blurrier, especially now that being seen is a form of currency. When someone does something super performative or provocative, it's almost like they're betting that the attention will fuel them, even if it's negative attention. It's like it gives them a narrative where they're the misunderstood character in a story. In a world where self-expression is broadcast to everyone, whether through social media, reality TV behaviors, or even just life lived proudly, putting oneself out there almost invites reaction. Not necessarily cruelty, but definitely response. And once you invite response, you cannot control if it's admiration or mockery.
Trevor, do you want to speak over it, or just want? Are you just?
This is what I'm just acting.
Oh,
out.
you're not gonna say. Okay.
Right.
When someone behaves in an exaggerated, performative, or radically vulnerable way, they're testing the social fabric. They're asking, will you accept me? Will you reject me? Will you even notice me? Some people seem almost hungry for the rejection because rejection confirms something important in their self-story. That they are different, that they are survivors, that the world is unfair, and that they are right to feel alienated. In that sense, asking to be bullied is not about masochism. It's about existential positioning. Being the underdog gives purpose. Being misunderstood gives meaning. Being mocked gives you an enemy. We grew up learning to cheer on the underdog because we see ourselves in them. Shane Koizen. This is the social equivalent of the martyr complex. Not for moral righteousness, but for the sake of belonging somewhere. It is despicable to pick on the shy, quiet, self-conscious kid who is just trying to hide and mind his own business. But we're not talking about that archetype. The shy kid is not ruffling any feathers. We are talking about the opposite of the shy kid. The loud kid who lacks self-awareness and makes himself seen. Traditional bullying is obviously harmful, but some people seem to court backlash on purpose. Maybe because it gives them validation that they're fighting against something, like they need opposition to define themselves. To understand the Chris Chan archetype, we need to understand his generation. We need to understand millennials. A lot of shows and movies that were targeted towards millennials were shaped by creators who carried the psychological wounds of their own adolescence into their work. The misunderstood underdog wasn't just a character, it was them, rewriting history, retroactively winning battles they had lost in real life. In these stories, the bullies are shallow, the popular kids are secretly miserable, and the weird kid ends up shining. It's wish fulfillment in a deeply emotional, almost spiritual sense. But the real world does not always act that way. Life isn't some John Hughes film drunk on stereotypes. Jocks can read books. Nerds can lift weights. People are nuanced and complicated because life is just not confusing enough. You cannot easily put everyone into boxes. However, when the myth this popular media presents gets baked into an entire generation's media diet, it shapes how people see conflict, status, and their own self-worth. This is the power of myth. Millennials grew up surrounded by shows and movies crafted by creators who had often been the outsiders themselves. Writers who once sat alone at lunch tables now crafted stories where the misunderstood underdog always won, where being different was a secret superpower. Millennials were told they could be anything they wanted, and they believed it. This culture nurtured a generation that was not afraid afraid to share their wildest dreams, their silliest passions, and their rawest selves online, treating the internet like an infinite scrapbook. Schools underwent a major shift in how they treated millennials. Fueled by good intentions, there was a nationwide push to build up self-esteem, encourage creativity, and ensure that every child felt special. Participation trophies and anti-bullying campaigns became the backbone of childhood development philosophy, and this was all great, but the generation pushing these philosophies did not fully understand them. Older generations would condemn the fact that kids got participation trophies for everything. And good point, old heads, but maybe ask yourselves who is buying these kids participation trophies in the first place? Even the purest efforts can have unintended consequences. The anti-bullying efforts helped encourage the safety and well-being of all people, but there were some negative externalities of these efforts. One of the biggest side effects of these anti-bullying efforts was an inflated sense of individual exceptionalism. Many millennials grew up believing that greatness was not just possible, but guaranteed, simply by showing up and being themselves. When adulthood revealed a world less forgiving, many were left anxious and deeply insecure. Another side effect was deep discomfort with failure. If you are always told you're special, failure feels like an existential threat. Millennials became a generation somehow more ambitious and more anxious, swinging between soaring dreams and crushing self-doubt. We've all been raised on television to believe that one day we'd all be millionaires and movie gods and rock stars, but we won't, and we're slowly learning that fact. And we're very, very pissed off. Tyler Durden. Raised in a culture that celebrated individuality and emotional openness, millennials were trained to see their every thought and feeling as something worthy of broadcasting. Early social media exploded in this environment. Through personal blogs, MySpace profiles, and YouTube channels, the internet became an endless diary, unaware that the ink was permanent. Chris Chan embodied this perfectly. He was a living manifestation of what happened when someone raised in a culture of radical self-expression encountered the brutal, permanent memory of the internet. So by the time Gen Z arrived, the winds shifted. They were raised in the shadow of millennials' open book optimism and the backlash it created. Gen Z, scarred by the mistakes of oversharing, approached the internet with a colder realism. They saw the fallout of naive vulnerability and instinctively recoiled from it. To them, Chris Chan wasn't just one person. It was about an entire millennial idealism ready to be dissected, mocked, and destroyed. And so the internet's treatment of Chris Chan evolved. What had once begun as crude fascination snowballed into something larger, an aggressive humiliation ritual. It wasn't just cruelty for cruelty's sake, it was generational rebellion, a way to punish the sins of oversharing, of believing that everyone could be a star in their own story. Chris Chan became the avatar of a dying dream and the target of a new internet that no longer believed in innocence. Not all bullying fits the cartoonish mold of a villain pushing a kid into a locker. Especially by the time Gen Z came of age, the nature of bullying evolved into something more complex, and in some ways, more ruthless. Sometimes what looks like bullying isn't purely intended to hurt. It's an aggressive form of social correction, a way of signaling this behavior is not acceptable here. In the digital age, this survival instinct sharpened. Instead of punching and name-calling, correction came in the form of public humiliation, for better and for worse. It was social Darwinism playing out across timelines and comment sections. In a world where everything is online forever, reputations can be destroyed instantly. Gen Z, growing up with this knowledge, created a survival of the fittest mentality. To survive online was to constantly self-edit, to learn what behaviors made you a target, and to preemptively correct yourself before the mob ever could. Chris Chan, a figure from an earlier, more naive internet, became a casualty of this dimensional merge. His lack of self-awareness and unfiltered existence became a symbol of what not to be. The attacks on Chris became a brutal demonstration to everyone watching. Adapt, conform, or be devoured. It wasn't just about cruelty, it was about survival, about a generation harshly showing what happens when you don't learn the new rules of a digital world. Gen Z did not just target millennials. Knowing how to use the internet became synonymous with knowing how to navigate in a society. Baby boomers had even less awareness than millennials on how to communicate using the internet. While elderly generations once had the highest levels of social intelligence from years of experience and offered a lot of wisdom to younger people on how to communicate with people, this tradition was breaking between baby boomers and Gen Z. Baby boomers became so out of touch, Gen Z came up with the saying, "Okay boomer," as a way to dismiss anything a boomer had to say. When baby boomers offered the rebuttal "okay renter" to Gen Z, this unfortunately further divided these generations. And as time progresses, Gen Alpha will somehow be correcting the wrongs of Gen Z's behavior on the internet. Believe it or not, Gen Alpha will develop its own way of monitoring Gen Z. Culture is cyclical. Refer to this generational-based cringe chart that will be shown in history textbooks in the years to come. In a strange way, bullying directed at figures like Chris Chan is not born purely from hatred. It's born from a twisted form of empathy. People see Chris's mistakes, his delusions, his desperate need for connection, and deep down, they recognize something unsettlingly familiar. They don't see themselves as the same as him, but they see parts of themselves they try to bury. The awkwardness, the loneliness, the wish to be loved without conditions. Chris Chan is not an alien creature. He is human. He is an exaggeration of the vulnerabilities almost everyone carries but learns to hide. And that is terrifying. It is easier to mock than to admit that, given slightly different circumstances, you might have made the same mistakes. It's easier to point and laugh than to sit with the quiet horror of realizing how thin the line is between being accepted and being exiled. In this way, cruelty becomes a form of self-defense. By othering Chris, by declaring him not like us, people protect the very fragile illusion of their own normalcy. They push him away, not because they feel nothing, but because they feel too much. There is a philosophical cruelty at play. An instinct to destroy the parts of others that threaten our carefully curated self-image. Chris Chan is not just a person who made strange videos and bad decisions, he became a mirror. When many were faced with that mirror, they chose to smash it rather than face the reflection staring back. This is the ultimate irony, that the most relentless cruelty is often inflicted not on those we despise, but on those who remind us of ourselves. Chris Chan's story may initially look like a comedy, but it is truly a tragedy. A sprawling, slow-motion collapse happening in real time, with the world watching and sometimes cheering as it happened. Watching Chris's life has been the closest thing we've come to watching a real-life episode of Black Mirror. A cautionary tale about what happens when a vulnerable individual collides with an unforgiving digital world. But unlike the characters in fiction, Chris did not have writers authoring his downfall. His life spiraled because few intervened, and anyone who did intervene just seemed to make it spiral faster. Chris Chan is a human being. You cannot put him in a box. He is a flawed, stubborn, offensive, racist, criminal, difficult person, like any of us might have become in isolation and misunderstanding. Because he was also a product of his environment, a childhood marked by developmental challenges, parental neglect, a society ill-equipped to handle neurodivergence, and an internet that weaponized attention. It's tempting to believe Chris was destined for this fate, that something essential about him made this inevitable, but that's putting him in a box. In different circumstances, with better support systems, with kinder influences, in a world that prized protection over spectacle, Chris's story could have been different. Maybe he would have found quiet contentment, building imaginary worlds without an audience waiting to tear them down. Instead, Chris Chan became the first truly public cautionary tale of the internet age, a living, breathing example of what happens when humanity values entertainment over compassion. Chris's life became a case study in how collective attention can lift, break, and permanently alter a human life. Maybe the tragedy is not just what happened to Chris. Maybe the tragedy is that we watched.